There has been a darker day in New Zealand politics. It was the 25th of July 2011 when the disgraceful, filthy, dirty tactics of that government and in the Prime Minister's office came to the fore in the actions that were about misleading and deceiving the New Zealand public.
That's right.
Now, Mr English was happy to read from the executive summary of this report. He clearly hasn't got into the recommendations. Now, he says that this has nothing to do with politics and the lack of political neutrality, but that's exactly what it's about. You only got to look at recommendations 3 and 5, which is now the SIS now has to go and get advice on how to act politically neutrally. Because this report highlights just what a disgraceful level of conduct that this government and the presiding minister, the Prime Minister, has over this department. It is shocking. And New Zealanders will be coming to terms tonight when they see the news of the fact that their government, of which many of whom have had great respect, that this is a government that does not know the boundaries between politics and political opportunism and the requirements of keeping a safe, steady hand on the levers of state. They have lost the boundaries. They don't know what the boundaries are. This report is very clear. And if we didn't know, if nobody knew what the central failing act on the part of the Prime Minister and his staff was, let's have a look at it. In paragraph 218 of the report, this is on the 25th of July, when the information was being exchanged. Have a look at this. On the same day, Mr de Joux, the Prime Minister's Deputy Chief of Staff, when Mr de Joux had the information from the SIS, on the same day Mr de Joux provided that information to Mr Eade, who had no security clearance, was not entitled to the information, with the suggestion that it might prompt an OIA request for those documents. Mr Eade then provided that same information to Mr Slater, John Key's friend, with whom he is in regular contact, Mr Slater, and then discussed the terms of the OIA request with Mr Slater and provided Mr Slater with a draft blog posts concerning the issue. It all ran out of the Prime Minister's office. All the allegations of Nicky Hager and dirty politics are verified and vindicated in the report. The Prime Minister presided over the dirtiest, filthiest, grubbiest, vilest operation we have ever seen in New Zealand politics today. And the Deputy Prime Minister sits there, laughs and giggles. You know what was most disappointing about Mr English's speech? You know, he actually came up smelling of roses during the election campaign. The only National Party MP who, when the dirty politics hit the headline, when John Key spun out of control, calling it a left-wing conspiracy, and it was Bill English who had the integrity and the honesty to say he didn't approve of that conduct. He knew it was happening. He knew it was happening, and he knew that it had been exposed, and he at least had the integrity to say he wouldn't tolerate it. Today it's changed. Today it's changed. This is a government in a desperate bid to control a reputation now in tatters. Not content with denying the obvious, not content with defending the indefensible, they release more reports. Judith Collins off the hook. No, she isn't. And the Department of Corrections and their absolute debacle, they released their report too. We know it's all wrong because this is a government now in tatters. His reputation is now in tatters. This is wrong. And we know how desperate it is when John Key quotes one passage from the report but refuses to go to the next paragraph. So he quotes the passage that says, neither Mr de Joux nor Mr Eade acted inconsistently with any obligation to the SIS when Mr Eade disclosed this information to Mr Slater for political purposes after being told it by Mr de Joux. Have a look at the next paragraph, Mr Joyce. Have a look at the next paragraph, because this is what it says. This is what it says. The events and issue in this inquiry do, however, demonstrate the lack of any steps by the NZSIS to ensure that its reporting relationship to the Prime Minister was consistent both with the requirements of security with its obligations of political neutrality. There it is in a nutshell. The Prime Minister doesn't care that the departments under its control act with the absence of political neutrality, because this is a Prime Minister, the most politically driven, maliciously driven Prime Minister we've had in a generation. In a generation. He is desperate to cling on to power. He runs a smear machine out of his office. It's been going undercover for 6 years, and now it's been exposed. Well, it's all coming to an end. The circus is over. The circus is leaving town. Mr. Joyce knows. He's been a ringmaster. He's been part of the ringmaster. He knows it's all wrong. It's all wrong. And it points to what we've all known. And it points to what we've all known about this government. It has no ethics and it has no integrity. And that is the shameful conclusion that thousands of New Zealanders will now draw. That the person they look to, the office we all look to, the Prime Minister's office, and of course there are political elements to it, that's the nature of politics. But here's our responsibility. When we come to this House as MPs, whether we sit on this side or that side, whether we are opposition members or government members, whether we are ministers or just MPs, we have an obligation to our Constitution to uphold and preserve the separation of powers in this great country of ours. And this government has lost the plot. This government cannot do it. This government cannot be trusted to respect the basic principles of our Constitution, that the bureaucracy, that the public service, that has such an important responsibility to remain neutral, to give free and frank advice, to do its job, to act in the interests of all New Zealanders, not just the ministers who they serve on a time-to-time basis. This government doesn't care about that. This government has never cared about constitutional principle. It stands under a cloud of shame. It is a disgrace. And those members who have integrity, because there are some opposite, they are now sullied and dirtied by the dreadful, appalling actions of this Prime Minister and those around him. Well, it's time to come to an end. Who on that side is going to have the courage to stand up and say to Prime Minister John Key, enough's enough. Enough's enough, Mr. Key. The people of New Zealand deserve better. The people of New Zealand deserve a government driven by ethics and integrity. Who is going to have the courage? Will it be Dr. Nick Smith? No. He's been kicked out of cabinet, put back in, kicked out, put back in. He knows enough about ethics and integrity because he's breached it enough times. He's the one. He's got experience. He should step up and say, you know, Mr. Key, I've been there where you've been. I've acted without integrity, and it's time to front up. It's time to front up to the people of New Zealand. It's time to front up and say, New Zealanders deserve a better approach. New Zealanders deserve a good, honest government, just like the chocolate bar. We deserve a good, honest government, because that's not the government we have at the moment. That's not the government we have at the moment. We need a government. We need a government that will observe the very basic principles of constitutional and democratic governance. And now the government's been exposed. John Armstrong from the New Zealand had it right when he said today that this government has plumbed new depths of arrogance and contempt. And you know, it's very easy. It would be very easy for this government to draw a line under it, simply by having John Key stand up publicly and say to New Zealand, to say to all New Zealanders, I got it wrong. I should not have had a smear machine operating out of my office. I should not have had Jason Eade, Jason two doors Eade, 2 doors down from the Prime Minister's office. I should not have had Jason Eade operating out of my office, a political operative, the Black Ops operator. I should not have allowed Phil Dejoux to breach his obligations to his security clearance to the SIS and to willy-nilly pass national security information around. He should stand up and apologise, and he should say to New Zealand, I got it wrong. Please forgive me. Is he man enough to do it? Is he man enough to stand up and say, I got it wrong, please forgive me? He won't, because he has been in denial. And everything he has said today in this Parliament and the handing out of the reports of every other disaster this government's presided over, and they've only been back for a few weeks, and they've had 3 disasters in one day already to have to account for. Will he be man enough to say it? No, he won't. This government is an embarrassment to the New Zealand Constitution. This government is an embarrassment to the people of New Zealand. And we've got another 3 years we've got to put up with this, but I tell the government this, we are ready to take you on, where no matter how dirty, no matter how filthy, no matter how grubby, but you're in it now, your noses are in it, your noses are in it, we know what you're like, we know what you're made of, it's no good. The people of New Zealand want something different and they're going to get it.